Hello everyone and welcome back to Deresley. In this video I'm going to show you some scratch building for my layout in the form of this row of 3 shops. I've made a few scratch built models in the past, but this is the first one I've made for buildings for my railway. The first thing you need if you're going to scratch build something is some measurements and some good illustrations of your prototype. With buildings it's not too difficult because you can normally get quite detailed shots and close-ups of something the size of the building and just find one that takes your fancy and take some photographs. This particular set of shops was in Southwold. This is in the marketplace, and these old shops I thought looked very interesting and would make a nice scratch building project. The first thing you want to do with photographs is to get as square on a shot as you can of the elevations. You know, this is the main elevation, which is the front elevation, and this is the only one I've got printed out at the moment. And from that, if you can scale that down to 0.0 scale, roughly, I use the figures here as a reference. So once you are happy with the scale, you can simply take measurements off your photographs, and from this it gives you the height of the roof, so you already then have the measurements all the way around the building, which is good. I've sort of done by eye things like the chimney heights and also from other kits and things I've made, you know, the Metcalf ones. You get a feeling for the correct height and proportion, plus check your photo references. And the same with this width here. I obviously couldn't measure it, the width of the building, but you can see by the 4 windows and again the size of the shop, you can have a sort of rough idea of how big that is. And for me, this doesn't have to be a perfect scale model of this particular row of shops. I'm just using it as a starting point for making my own. And although the photographs I've got are taken fairly recently, so in 2016, my model is based in the mid-1960s. So I needed to search on the internet for some photographs, if I could find them, of these particular shops in the 1960s to give me more idea. And in fact it was pretty similar. The Silver Jubilee clock on the wall obviously was not there. That came in 1977. Interestingly, back in the 60s, these were 3 separate buildings, and this window was blanked, bricked up, sort of remnant from the old window tax, and there was a door entry here, so I've just put that back. Also, in the intervening years, this chimney has been removed and is no longer there, but in the 60s there was another chimney here, so I've put the chimney back. But it doesn't have to be precise, it just has to look right. And a nice thing with making something that's scratch built is it's going to be unique on your layout, and nobody else will have one, and you know, you can get a scale and a proportion to this which hopefully will look very effective. The thing that's prompted me to make the video is I found an interesting way of producing windows, which I'll show you shortly. The basic construction of this is fairly straightforward if you've built a Metcalf kit, or you've built one of the buildings from scale scenes. You get the printed images, and you have to cut out the card, which is either 2mm or 1mm. If I take the roof off, I can show you the construction on the inside. It's basically 2mm card. The scale scenes laminated this to make 4mm walls, which, you know, is very sturdy, but I thought I'd just see how it looked with 2mm. It seems fairly strong. The brickwork is from Scale Scenes, and they have a very useful site where you can download from their Scratch Builders yard various offerings of brick in colour and style, and also roof tiles and all sorts of other very useful things for scratch builders. So this is the stage I am at. The construction is solid at the moment, but I need to put some rooms in here. The roof was a bit tricky to get the angles to match the prototype. This I made in 1mm card, and I've cut the apertures out for the chimney pots. This one I've yet to build. So I'd like to start this video really by showing you how I constructed the windows. I wanted this to be scratch built, so I kept thinking of different ways of being able to produce windows that wasn't too complicated and that would get them all square. And I suddenly thought it would be a good idea perhaps not to think about making individual windows, but making the windows for each wall as a panel. So I took a piece of 0.5mm plastic card, holding it in place from behind. I drew around each aperture. Then I allowed 2mm for the framing and detailing, and with a ruler and pencil drew another inner square that's 2mm in. Having reached this stage, it was then a simple case of removing the inner aperture to give a nice, neat, even row of windows. I'm now going to make the window frames. These are strips of 2mm wide plastic card cut from the same 0.5mm sheet. I've got one in place, and simply all I do is take some liquid plastic cement, and with the brush just run that down the window frame like that, and then offer the strip up to the edge, making sure it fits so I can just see the pencil lines, so that I know it'll fit into the aperture. And then again, using the pencil line as a guide, just cut off the length. I've got two sides of that frame done, so I'll go round each of the windows. The main framing of the windows is now done. This is a much easier way of making several windows rather than doing them individually, because you can square them up and make sure they all line up. What I'm doing here, or what I've done, is to cement another piece of the framing across the centre of each of the windows. By doing it like this, I can ensure they're all going to line up. This is going to form the bottom rail of the sash windows. So up here I'll be building up another layer of plastic card to give a little depth to these two windows to indicate the sash windows. So I'll just cut this. These should be dry now, so I'll just cut the bits between, and they need a bit of tidying up, but basically they're all lined up now. This is a completed window assembly in close-up. You can see, I hope, the framing around the window itself and the raised framing there to represent the top part of the sash window. On the back I have glued a piece of clear styrene sheet to form the glazing, and then on the bottom halves of the windows I put a piece of tracing paper to give a sort of a frosted glass look, and then these are curtains. These are easy enough to make with felt tip pens and things. You know, you need very little actually detail to make them look like curtains, but these came from a leftover bit from a Metcalf kit. So the effect, I think, looks quite convincing. So I will now, with the windows this size, I can put some araldite here and just clamp them in position on the model. Anything you fit behind the windows, like the curtains and the tracing paper, can simply be attached there with bits of sellotape. I haven't finished all the windows, but the front ones are done, and so I've turned my attention to the two main shop openings. These I always intended to make as separate units and make them so that they fit in the two spaces here. I decided to make them from plasticard so that it can be spray painted. I've made the left hand module, that's now finished, and this is made just with 1mm plasticard. A little bit of trial and error and everything was needed here to get it to work, but it's perfectly dry and it looks quite solid. I've got the name board there and the little box facing for the awning, and this should fit neatly into here. It needs a little bit of fiddling, just let me get that in, but it sort of plugs in like a little unit. There we go. To model the other shop, I needed another print from my photo references, and I needed this elevation in order to work out some details for this bit. This angle here is the corner of the building, and of course it is at 90 degrees, but the angle of this shop extension, this shop front here, this is not 90 degrees because the road goes off at an angle. So I didn't measure this angle particularly, I just created a non-90 degree angle to suit my railway, and making sure it fitted around the corner of the building, I simply cut a piece of card 90 degrees there and have the angle there. Actually, this is a bit shallow. I'm going to cut another one before I fit it and have it a little bit more open like that. So here is the modified roof extension cut around the 90 degrees of the building, and I've increased the angle a little bit more to suit my roads. I've actually glued this in place over the shop, and it's a question now of building with plasticard the two fronts again in a similar way that I did the butcher shop. This shop front was quite fun to build. In fact, it was a little bit more complicated than the butcher shop because of the non-90 degree angle. You can see I started off with some plastic card cut similar to the roof, and that's the 90 degree that fits around the building, and this repeats the angle I cut for the roof. So starting from that, I made my front panels all from 1mm plasticard and carefully glued them in place using bits of bracing as I went along to strengthen it. Here you can see I decided to add some of the counters at the same time. On the real shop, some of these sills were extended and they carried plants and flowers and things like that, which I thought might be quite nice. I've done this little mock-up of the building so far with both the shop fronts fitted in. I think it looks reasonably good. I've put a couple of cars in the scene just to indicate a scale, and all looks pretty good. The roof still isn't fixed or anything, but I have finished and fitted the windows along this side. If I remove the shop front, you'll see I've had to build the walls out to extend the building in two places to take the new front. This is laminations of 2mm card covered in the brick paper, and I'll show you that now because I'm going to make the third of the chimneys. I've cut the hole here for the third chimney. Unfortunately, when I put the bracing on the other side, I did that before I cut the hole, so I've got that slightly in the wrong place. But the laminations of 2mm card, I've made 4 of them to make the chimney, and one of them I've had to cut the shape so that it fits over that. So it's no problem really. Anyway, these are the 4 laminations. I've made this bit to fit in the roof, and that's the angle of the roof, so that'll make sure the chimney sits upright, and then I can just laminate these 4 pieces to make a block. I'm now going to make the doors and porches for the 2 shop fronts. This is the butcher's shop and this is the greengrocer's. I've got to fit a little porch in here and a door. So the first thing is to measure the height and width, and the width of the doors I already know is 1 centimetre, but I'm just going to measure the height. So I now know the width of the door is 1 centimetre and the height of the door and the little fanlight window above is 3.4 centimetres. This is the first of the doors. I could have made them out of card or used some spare ones from Metcalf, but because I want to paint this the same as the framework around the shop windows, I've decided to do it out of plastic card. So like the windows, I've cut the little fanlight and the window in the door out of this piece of plastic card, which is going to be the door and the frame all in one. So in order to see the door, using a ruler of course with my offal cutter, I've cut grooves all around the door, so when eventually I put some dark weathering in there, you'll see the door separate from the frame. So all I have to do now is cut this away from the sheet. I finished the construction of the third chimney, so all 3 chimneys now are at this same basic stage. I've also finished all the window ledges. These again were just 1mm plastic card, trimmed and glued to the bottom of the window frames. In fact, I've about finished this part of the build. The basic structure is complete, the windows are in, etc. It just needs an overall detailing, weathering and painting. This I've decided to leave until part 2, where I can cover these points in a little more detail. I hope you've enjoyed part 1, and if you've ever thought of scratch building for your railway, perhaps after this you might give it a go. It's a bit time consuming and fiddly, but if you've had some experience making card kits, you've got an idea of the basic construction principles I used. I hope you've enjoyed part 1 of this video. I'll work on part 2 as soon as I can, and thanks for watching.